What's happening at the world's longest international border? This week, we're uncovering some surprising migration trends between the United States and Canada that might completely change how you think about North American movement. Stay tuned, because one of these statistics dropped by a staggering 89%, and you need to know why. Welcome back to Border Watch Weekly, where we break down the most important migration news you need to know. I'm your host here in Info Express, and today, we're diving deep into the latest developments shaping the US-Canada border. Whether you're considering crossing the border yourself, you have family or friends who migrate between these two countries, or you're simply fascinated by immigration policy and its real-world impacts, this episode is packed with information you won't find anywhere else. We've got dramatic policy shifts, surprising demographic trends, and practical information that could affect your next border crossing. So let's get into it. Let's start with the headline that's making waves in immigration circles and causing policymakers on both sides of the border to take notice. Canada has reported an absolutely dramatic 89% drop in illegal US crossings by foreign nationals. Now, when I first saw this number, I had to double-check it because that's not just a reduction, that's a complete transformation of the border landscape. We're talking about the period between June and December 2024. To put this in perspective, imagine if your commute time suddenly dropped by 89%, or if your grocery bill decreased by that amount. This isn't a marginal change. This represents a fundamental shift in how the border is functioning. But what's behind this massive decline? Canada hasn't been sitting idle. They've implemented comprehensive border security measures through what they call the Border Plan, which was released in December 2024. This includes enhanced surveillance technology, increased cooperation with US authorities, deployment of additional border personnel, and stricter enforcement protocols, all contributing to this dramatic shift. Think about it this way. If you're someone trying to cross illegally, the calculus has completely changed. The likelihood of getting caught has increased substantially, and the consequences are more severe. This isn't just about building walls or barriers. It's about smart, coordinated enforcement that uses technology and intelligence sharing to identify risks before they reach the physical border. The numbers tell an even bigger story when you look beneath the surface. Canada has increased refusals for travelers from high-risk countries by a staggering 61%. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let's be clear about what this means. This isn't about discrimination. It's about risk assessment based on fraud patterns, security concerns, and historical data about visa abuse. When Canada talks about high-risk countries, they're looking at several factors: media, passport with fraudulent stamps, countries with high document fraud, visa document authenticity check, countries where document fraud is prevalent, regions with high rates of visa overstays, and areas where security screening is more challenging. The 61% increase in refusals suggests that Canada is taking a much more thorough approach to vetting applications before someone even gets on a plane. And here's another fascinating data point that tells us a lot about how the system is evolving. Asylum claims by Canadian visa holders dropped 18% from October to November 2024. We went from 7,174 claims down to 5,832 in just 1 month. That's nearly 1,400 fewer claims in a single month. Now, what does this tell us? It suggests that Canada's pre-screening processes are becoming significantly more effective at identifying genuine travelers versus those who might be planning to abuse the visa system by entering as tourists and then claiming asylum. This is actually a win-win situation when done properly. Genuine visitors get through more smoothly, and resources for processing asylum claims can be focused on those who truly need protection. I want to emphasize something important here. Legitimate asylum seekers still have pathways to protection in Canada. The country remains committed to its humanitarian obligations. But what's changing is the ability to distinguish between genuine refugees fleeing persecution and economic migrants using asylum claims as a backdoor immigration strategy. It's a delicate balance, and from these numbers it appears Canada is finding ways to maintain that balance. Now let's talk about something that could directly affect you if you're planning to cross the US-Canada border anytime soon. Starting January 6, 2025, Canada updated the hours of service at 35 land border crossings. That's 35 different locations where the operating hours have changed. The Canada Border Services Agency made these changes as part of a broader strategy to enhance both security and efficiency for travelers. What does this mean in practical terms? Well, some crossings that might have operated 24/7 could now have limited hours. Others might open later in the morning or close earlier in the evening. Some seasonal crossings might have adjusted their schedules entirely. Why does this matter? Imagine you're driving from Seattle to Vancouver for a weekend getaway, and you arrive at the border at 11 p.m., expecting to cross, only to find the crossing closed until 8 a.m. the next morning. That's not just an inconvenience, that's a derailed trip. Or consider businesses that rely on just-in-time delivery across the border. These hour changes could affect supply chains, shipping schedules, and logistics planning. Before you plan that road trip, that cross-border shopping expedition, or that visit to family on the other side, make absolutely sure you check the updated hours for your specific crossing point. The Canada Border Services Agency has this information on their website, and trust me, 5 minutes of research could save you hours of frustration. Pro tip: if you're a frequent border crosser, consider signing up for programs like Nexus, which gives you access to dedicated lanes and can make your crossing experience much smoother regardless of the hour changes. And always have your documentation ready: passport, any necessary visas, proof of purpose for your visit, and be prepared to answer questions about where you're going and how long you'll stay. Now here's something that might completely flip your understanding of North American migration patterns. While media coverage often focuses on people seeking refuge in Canada, there's actually a powerful reverse trend happening that's flying completely under the radar. Canadian emigration to the United States has reached levels not seen in 10 years or more. Let that sink in for a moment. While everyone's talking about Americans moving to Canada, and that's certainly happening, we're also seeing a significant northbound to southbound flow of Canadians heading to the United States. This is one of the most underreported stories in migration coverage today. So why are Canadians heading south? Let's break down the push and pull factors. First, economic opportunities. Certain sectors in the US, particularly technology, finance, and specialized healthcare, offer significantly higher salaries than comparable positions in Canada. We're talking salary differentials of 30, 40, sometimes even 50% for the same job. Second, housing affordability. Now this might surprise you given the housing crisis in many US cities, but for Canadians coming from markets like Toronto or Vancouver, two of the most expensive housing markets in the world, many US cities actually offer better value. A tech worker moving from Toronto to Austin or Denver might find they can afford a significantly larger home for less money. Third, climate. Let's be honest, Canadian winters are no joke. For some Canadians, especially retirees, the appeal of spending winters in Florida, Arizona, or California is powerful. And with remote work becoming more normalized, some Canadians are finding ways to maintain Canadian ties while enjoying warmer weather for much of the year. But here's what makes this trend so fascinating from a policy perspective. This bi-directional flow reminds us that migration isn't just a one-way street driven by crisis or desperation. It's a complex, dynamic process driven by individual circumstances, career opportunities, family considerations, lifestyle preferences, and broader economic factors. When politicians talk about migration, they often frame it as a problem to be solved. But what we're seeing between the US and Canada is migration as a feature of an integrated North American economy. People move where opportunities take them, where quality of life improves, where they can build better futures for their families. That's not a crisis. That's human nature and economic rationality at work. We can't have an honest conversation about current US-Canada migration patterns without addressing the elephant in the room: the impact of Trump administration immigration policies. Trump's immigration crackdown has been a significant factor driving some individuals to seek refuge in Canada. While the most dramatic surges happened earlier in 2025, this pressure continues to shape migration decisions today. Let's look at what's actually been happening. Following Trump's election and the implementation of stricter immigration enforcement, Canada saw notable increases in asylum seekers crossing at irregular border points, most famously at Roxham Road in Quebec before it was closed through the Safe Third Country Agreement amendment. Canada finds itself in a unique and challenging position. On one hand, the country has a proud tradition of humanitarian protection. Canadians generally see their country as a refuge for those fleeing persecution. There's a strong national identity tied to being welcoming and compassionate. On the other hand, there are practical realities that can't be ignored. Processing asylum claims takes time and resources. Housing asylum seekers while their claims are processed requires infrastructure. Border communities have been stretched by sudden influxes of people, and there are legitimate questions about capacity. How many people can Canada reasonably accommodate while maintaining the quality and speed of its asylum adjudication process? What's emerging is a more nuanced Canadian approach. The message from Ottawa has been clear. Canada welcomes legitimate refugees and immigrants through proper channels, but the country is also committed to maintaining border integrity and ensuring that the asylum system isn't abused or overwhelmed. This means faster processing of claims, quicker removals of those whose claims are rejected, better cooperation with the U.S. on identifying who crosses the border, and yes, more stringent screening to distinguish between people fleeing genuine persecution and those primarily seeking economic opportunities. It's worth noting that Canada's approach differs philosophically from some U.S. policies. While the Trump administration has focused heavily on deterrence, making the journey and arrival so difficult that people don't attempt it, Canada is trying to balance enforcement with maintaining its humanitarian commitments. Whether this approach is sustainable depends on factors largely outside Canada's control, including U.S. policy decisions and global migration pressures. The bottom line, the U.S.-Canada border isn't isolated from global migration trends or domestic U.S. policy. What happens in Washington directly affects Ottawa, and Canadian policymakers are constantly trying to thread the needle between compassion and control. If you found this breakdown valuable and insightful, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that subscribe button. We bring you comprehensive migration news updates every single week, breaking down complex policy issues into clear, understandable information. Second, smash that like button to help this video reach more people who need to stay informed about border policy. The algorithm favors videos that get early engagement, so your like in the first hour actually matters tremendously in helping us grow this community of informed viewers. And third, drop a comment below telling me, are you surprised by these migration trends? Do you think Canada's approach to border security is working? Have you been affected by any of these policy changes? I read every single comment, and your perspectives help me understand what angles to explore in future videos. And here's a bonus. If you have specific migration questions or topics you want us to cover in depth, let me know in the comments or reach out on our community tab. Your suggestions directly shape what we talk about next week. Maybe you want to understand the Nexus application process, or you're curious about work permits, or you want a deep dive into asylum law. Tell me what you need, and I'll make it happen. So what's the bottom line this week? Let me bring this all together for you. The US-Canada border is experiencing a major transformation driven by policy decisions, enforcement priorities, and complex migration flows. We're seeing stricter enforcement working, with that stunning 89% drop in illegal crossings proving that when Canada commits resources and attention to border security, it can dramatically reshape migration patterns. We're seeing operational changes at dozens of border crossings that could affect your travel plans. We're seeing tighter visa screening that's reducing asylum claims and increasing refusals for high-risk applications. But we're also seeing something that challenges simple narratives. Complex, bi-directional migration flows. While some people move north seeking refuge, Canadians are moving south in increasing numbers seeking opportunity. This isn't a one-way crisis. It's a dynamic, interconnected system where people make rational choices based on their circumstances. Whether you're a traveler who crosses the border regularly, an immigrant or potential immigrant navigating these systems, a policymaker trying to understand what works, or simply someone who wants to understand what's happening in North America, these trends matter profoundly. They shape communities, economies, and lives on both sides of the border. Migration isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet or political talking points. It's about real people making difficult decisions about where to build their lives, where to raise their families, where to pursue their dreams. Understanding the policies, the enforcement, the practical realities that helps us have more informed, more compassionate, and more productive conversations about these issues. Next week, we're going to dive deep into the economic impacts of these migration changes. What happens to border communities when crossing patterns shift? How do businesses adapt? What are the fiscal implications for both countries? It's going to be fascinating, so make sure you're subscribed. Stay informed, stay curious, stay engaged with these issues that shape our shared continent. I'll see you next week with more migration news you need to know. Until then, safe travels wherever your journey takes you.